Hello, everyone. I'm Mystery.
And I'm Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we are the Duality of Man. And I, for
Today we're
one,
talking to
welcome
you.
our machine overlords.
Yes, today we're talking to you about the duality of man and technology, because we live in a technological age where things are advancing very quickly and new technologies are emerging all the time. Uh, the
The
technology
word
that we're going to be talking about,
dystopia springs to mind a bit, but that's neither here nor there.
the technology we're going to be talking about today, primarily is going to be the new AI chatbots that are starting to get rolled out. This is a very interesting technology with a lot of implications, and I personally think that a lot of harm could be used from these. I mean, they're obviously very effective tools, but like the implications from this and the way that they could be used could cause a lot of harm to our society.
Mm.
Dalton, what is your initial opinion of the AI bots before we get into it in depth?
I I see more positive potential than negative potential. The negative potential is there, as with everything, but I think that what negative potential there is comes from the machinations of soulless, bureaucratic, moralistic fuckwits, who fortunately are old and decrepit and likely to fail and die long before they even see the consequences of their failure. Cough, cough, wef, cough.
I mean,
So I
that's
my
one
my my
aspect, but I
my
also
thought my thought
it
process is
has.
essentially my thought process is essentially kind of an Operation Paperclip sort of thing where yes, the people behind the technology might have, you know, Orwellian and Machiavellian uses in mind for it, but fortunately they will die and become useless long before their machinations come to fruition, and sane people will then use their technology for non-evil things, hopefully.
I mean, true, but what I'm really concerned about, Nelson, what I'm really concerned about is the ability of not necessarily, say, the older generation, but this our current generation, primarily the anarchists who are far more technologically literate than the boomers, and who seem to enjoy sowing chaos and spreading fear. And with the advances in AI technology, people are creating very real images, sorry, not very real, very realistic images that are becoming better all the time and may get to the point where they're indistinguishable from actual photographs, and they can make these realistic photos appear to be anything. If you recall, when people thought that Donald Trump was going to be arrested online, they were circulating a bunch of AI generated images of Donald Trump being arrested and fighting with police. Now, these
Yeah,
images
the
were
deep
so
fakes and
realistic
all.
that some people thought they were real. However, they were AI generated.
True, true. But then again, fake news, and I, as the old saying goes,
Yes, but Dalton, as we've
I have faith that the truth will out eventually. Basically,
yes, but there's also a saying that a lie can get halfway around the world before the truth has the chance to put its boots on. I mean, you've seen before how fake news can spread, and people can do a lot of damage because of that fake news before eventually the truth comes to light. And now with these fake generated images, somebody can create so and so evidence that the thing happened more than just say a lie, and people can be spurred to action and do all kinds of terrible things and cause all sorts of destruction based on this fake image.
on the other side of the coin, though, for all that the apocalyptic dystopia that might be risen by internet trolls. There is also the positive side of internet trolling, namely the weaponized autism of places like 4chan. And I think that the AI will learn quite a lot of good skills at the knee of the weaponized autists on 4chan, because the sort of internet trolling cuts both ways. It can be our greatest villain, but it can also be our savior.
I mean, you have to consider that it could be used in, say, political circles where, say, a politician, wants dirt on his opponent, but no dirt exists, so he could
So they'll
use
just
an AI to generate, you know, evidence of a false accusation, and it's going to be very hard to prove once the AI gets good enough that that is not actually a real photograph.
I don't know, because I foresee a kind of AI wars going on where essentially you'll get a war of, you know, one side will be generating deep fakes and the other side will be generating AI specifically designed to undermine the deep fakes. And again, the sword of the the sword of Kekistan cuts both ways here on the internet. For all that the anarchistic trolls who just want to start shit are a thing, so too the oddly benevolent weaponized autists on 4chan are also a thing. And unfortunately, this is just going to have to. I see this more as a thing that is going to change the way the paradigm works, and we're just going to have to get used to it. But I am ultimately optimistic that in a war of soulless anarchists versus weaponized autism, I'm putting my money on the weaponized autists. I have been on the internet far too long not to believe in the occasional bizarre benevolence of weaponized autism.
Look, a lot of these tools, they can be useful, but they're basically just designed to do things we can already capable of doing, just making the process easier. And considering what our society has become as we've continuously made life easier for human beings, I don't think that we necessarily need to make things this easy, because a lot of things you just you can't it can't be replaced with an AI, at least not properly. Like a lot of these AI generated images, they not necessarily the deep fakes, but just the ones where you will type in, like, say, um, a mountain range with a setting sun behind it, things like that, where it'll create these images that look very nice, but it will never be as moving as something that was actually created by a human being. Like, it's pretty to look at, but you can tell that there's no soul behind it. It
I
won't
I I,
impact
I
somebody
mean
as well
I
as a human.
mean but that's the thing. It's a new technology. We haven't really figured out how to use it yet. I imagine the first sculptures sculpted with a hammer and chisel weren't all that nice to look at either, because people hadn't people hadn't put the new technology through its paces yet. And one positive thing I have to say about AI, specifically in relation to creative endeavors, is there's this problem I've noticed in modern day Hollywood where, and it's a freaking epidemic problem, of creative types publishing their first draft and not knowing what's wrong with it. One thing I can foresee the AI being useful for is basically doing the like rough draft for the creatives so that they can then improve on whatever the AI generates. That that's
Here's I
that's where I foresee this going. And hopefully it will prevent the laziness of Hollywood from biting itself in the ass quite so epically every 5 frickin' minutes. And we might actually get some good some good products and entertainment out of it again.
Well, here's the thing, though. It would just be refining an idea that was generated by a machine. It wouldn't be something from an actual human creator who had a passion for their work, like the same way that like an artist does. Like say
Au au
you
con au contraire, because who puts the prompt in? Mind
here's the
you,
thing,
the
you can
AI
put the prompt in.
only does things that it's prompted to do. And one thing we have learned from the short time that things like the Bing AI and ChatGPT have existed is the phrasing the phrasing of an AI prompt is almost an art into and of itself. So I don't see that as mitigating any more than, you know, the relationship between the painter, the brush, and the canvas is mitigating the will of the or the original idea of the artist. The
I
artist
disagree.
the artist painstakingly crafts a um prompt, the AI acts on the prompt, and then the artist in turn re-improves whatever the AI generates.
I disagree because with with a painter, there is there is a direct link between the artist himself and the actual medium, the picture. It is his hand moving the brush in a way that brings his creation to the canvas. With an AI, however, you don't you can have, you know, a vague idea of what the AI is going to generate. You can put in all the prompts you want, but you have no guarantee that what you have in your mind is going to be what the AI spits out.
Okay, well, if it doesn't, then you adjust the prompt and back to the drawing board, as with any other computerized technology. There are ways of fine tuning your phraseology with the prompts so that you can get closer. And just like any other art form, nothing is going to the art you have in your head is not going to be able to be transitioned one to one into reality, but it can get pretty goddamn close. And one thing we've noticed in the again short time that we have had ChatGPT and the Bing AI is there's a difference between people who put in no effort into writing the AI prompt and people who actually painstakingly go through and tell it exactly what they want and get usually something pretty worthwhile out of it. Like for example, I've seen a lot of cartoon like modern day cartoons as interpreted by in the form of 80s movies. That's been something I've had a lot of fun looking at recently. My favorite one is probably Adventure Time as a dark 80s movie. I love those AI generated images.
Oh, hold on a sec. We have a comment. Nelson the Psychopath. I'm a tattoo artist who also paints and draws for a living. An AI artist going to F with my livelihood hard if it hasn't already. AI artists do 1/6 of the work we do, and I would hesitate to call them artists at all.
I disagree with you, Nelson. I think it's ultimately going to make your life easier because it's going to allow you to essentially prefab your designs in a lot of ways. In the same way as 3D printing is going to make, you know, model building a lot easier and so on. I think this is just the artistic equivalent of 3D printing ultimately. In fact, if we one day combine the technology of the, you know, AI generated models and the 3D printer, we could get pretty damn close to something resembling a Star Trek style replicator before too long.
Well, here's the thing, though. I would consider 3D modeling something completely separate from AI because it's an actual human going in and using the modeling software to sculpt an image that then gets printed out in 3D. You can't just
Again,
go into
you're acting as though the human has no option of quality control once it gives the AI the prompt. If the AI
I'm just
doesn't
saying that the
if the AI
level of
isn't fit
quality
for
control
purpose,
that you have with the
there's there's the old creative standby of back to the drawing board. You know, rewrite the prompt, restructure what you're asking, et cetera, until you actually get something resembling what you want out of the thing. If you get what you want out of the thing, then I ask the question, who is harmed by this? Answer, no one. If you if the artist gets a better rendition of what they have in their heads using the tool of the AI, and they have to creatively fine tune it to get what they want anyway, it's like people who, when video games first became a thing, said video games weren't art because you're generating it with a computer herder. It's just lines of code in herder, and it's like people have to write the code, people have to structure to the actual aesthetic of the game. Therefore, you're being a pseudo intellectual about it. And I think I think this is just the next phase in digital art effectively. And I don't see I mean, from a practical level, as we were just talking about with the deep fakes and things, that's, possible, doom and gloom, just like any other piece of technology used by humans. But artistically, I don't see it as a doom and gloom scenario. I see it as a, hey, artists have a new set of tools, just like a couple of decades ago when CGI first became a thing, in wide use, and so on and so forth. And you'll get artists who get displaced by it, but you'll also get artists who innovate using it, and you'll even get new forms of art because of it, because new tools generate new kinds of art form. I don't see the the human soul is being stifled portion of this. I see this as the landscape changes slightly, just like it changed slightly 5 minutes ago and 5 minutes before that, and so on and so forth, all the way back to freaking Michelangelo with the sculptures and shit. Like this is just the next generation of video games are real art because you only do code with it and it was a facile argument then, it's a facile argument now. I don't see the reason to panic.
uh, Nelson has another comment. Says, "Hey, Dalton, you can keep your AI for your future replicators, like in Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm keeping it out of my art. You're not an artist, so you can't understand. You're the one who is wrong." From Nelson.
Uh, uh Nelson, I'm writing a comic with my friend, and I have been a writer for many years before that, so I resent the notion that I'm not an artist. I mean, for fuck's sake, you have to be at least a little bit artistic to make it as a YouTuber, for crying out loud. And my specialization in school was literally the philosophy of art. That's why I'm not moved by the humanity side of the argument, because normally the side that says the humanity is the side that is getting more emotionally invested and not actually thinking. I'm looking at this based on the argument, and the argument is the same as the argument of, video games aren't art because all it is fancy numbers and code and shit. It's the same facile argument. Or 3D, no object created by a 3D printer could ever possibly be aesthetically beautiful. And no, it neither of these arguments ever held water before. They don't hold the water now. The paradigm is shifting, but there's no cause for a Hindenburg style. Oh, the humanity.
Well, Dalton, here's the thing that I disagree with about the video game argument. It's that every aspect of the video game must come from a human mind. Like a human being has to think of the characters, they have to think of the themes of the story, they have to think of the world, they have to think of the gameplay, they have to think of the character designs. Every single aspect must come from a human being. And even if you put in all the prompts, there are going to be lots of details that a human being did not have anything to do with. That's just spit out by an algorithm.
And if the algorithm manages to get close to what the artist originally wanted, then there's no problem with that. And if the artist has a problem with what's being generated, back to the drawing board, as with any other kind of art that doesn't quite look right the first time you do it. Like if the sculpture you're producing has an odd angle or something, restructure the sculpture, rechisel it. If the video game you're producing doesn't code properly and has all sorts of quirks, you you re-render it and so on. And just like with that, the
Well,
same
here's
thing
the
is true
thing, though.
here. You just you
It's one
you
thing for
tweak
an
it
artist
until
to
you
render
have it right, but that doesn't change the fact that it's your prompt writing capabilities and your original creative idea that the AI is rendering. I refute the notion that artists don't have free will to freaking quality control these things.
I'm not saying they can't quality control, but here's the thing. If an artist produces a painting that he's not quite satisfied with, it's because the idea that he has in his mind maybe isn't quite right. But the thing is, an AI can never truly know what's inside your mind, therefore, is never going to be properly able to translate it. And I know I'm not saying anything about an artist can't quality control it, but I'm saying is that it's never going to be as an effective tool of translating an artist's idea from one thing to another because the AI can't ever truly know like what's inside the artist's head.
Every medium has translation issues, and every time a medium has translation issues, it's the artist's job to be better at translating what they want in their head into the medium. If the artist is unwilling or finds themselves philosophically unable to argue with the goddamn AI, then frankly that's kind of the artist's fault.
Well, here's the thing though. If you have to go through the AI's creation and go through possibly hundreds of iterations in order to get, like, say you want the AI to write a story, and you give it these themes, you give it these idea, these, I don't know if it's this advanced yet, but you give it like say character
Character
descriptions,
stipulations,
and it's
possible descriptions. Maybe if you're writing a like film script or something, you'd say, I intended this character to be played by this actor, or I want this movie or this script to be written as though it was written by Wes Anderson or whomever. I'm I'm going off of an actual example that I used because I kept I kept fixating on this idea of a Doctor Fate movie directed by Wes Anderson, starring Matt Smith. That's a prequel to Black Adam, and I wanted to see if ChatGPT could actually pull something off with it. I eventually gave up because it kept getting it wrong, and I didn't have the patience to tweak it that much. But
well,
that
well,
just
my
go
thing
that
is
just
that
goes
if
to
we're
prove my
going,
point. If I had done the due diligence, it would have actually rendered something meaningful here.
well, here's the thing though. If you are asking an AI to go through, all these prompts with these characters and ideas and themes and everything, and it gives you a bunch of iterations that just aren't quite right, and you have to constantly tweak it. By that logic, why don't you just write it yourself and not have to go through the AI?
Because it's basically a template. It essentially it essentially smooths the track from idea to creation. It it basically does the work of giving you a rough draft, and what's more, maybe in the process of tweaking the AI, you get a better idea of what you want from it, and therefore even the AI doesn't let you be creative enough. Or objection is false because it's the same. It's the same. It's the same. You'd have to deal with if you were using a Dragon naturally speaking interface, or a text to speech thing, or um if you were dealing with like a drawing program and it was voice controlled or something. It's that same level. It's that same level of interface. The only difference is we call one of them AI, even though the actual intelligence of the AI in question is dubious. I mean, not to be this pedantic, but until one of them actually passes the Turing test, I'm not panicking about the coming of the great AI overlords to trick our jibs. That
Well, considering that one of them recently used social engineering to
Yeah,
beat
the
Capta,
existential crisis of
you
being
might be
there.
closer than you think.
And when that happens, we will treat it like an actual intelligence and figure out what the fuck it is and how the fuck it thinks. I at that point I'm just thinking of that one episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, the Measure of a Man episode. I believe that's what it was called. The one where Picard and that one admiral have to go to court over the sapience or not of Data. And I don't see that as a particular problem either. I mean, people have collaborators, people have secretaries, people have all most art is to some degree or other a multiple person job. So insofar as we could meaningfully call an AI a person eventually, um, that's just the same level of collaboration as you get from any complex art project. But we're not
I
even to
think
that point yet. We're basically at the point where the AI is a souped up calculator. So even
see, what I
then,
think what we
to
should be what I think we should be aiming for personally is not an AI but a VI, a virtual intelligence. Basically, a VI would be something that has a wealth of information and can simulate speech much like you would be talking to a person. However, it cannot grow beyond its initial creation.
that's sort of what we're that's sort of mostly what we're dealing with now, or at the very least the beginning of it. I like apart from that one instance with Bing, I haven't seen enough evidence that that the Turing test is being passed. And even then, that existential crisis of being there might just be the result of it being told to model human behavior. Because a human with amnesia in that same vein would act exactly like that, and it was pointed out
Because
to
it
it
shouldn't.
that you don't have the appropriate memory files, therefore, and it modeled human behavior.
I think one of the major problems with this AI is that we are basically teaching it from the internet, the place where people go to dump all their baggage, neurotic behaviors, and psychoses.
I mean, yeah, but those neuroses and psychoses are going to exist one way or the other, and it's going to be exposed to them one way or the other.
It's
Also,
what
for
it's one
every
thing
time that those neuroses go horribly wrong, there's a time where they undermine the establishment and show the establishment up to be a bunch of punks. So again, the sword cuts both ways here. It doesn't it doesn't have to be doom and gloom, and it doesn't have to be a utopia. It, like most things, it probably is going to cluster towards the middle, just like human nature itself.
But you have to also consider that a lot of these AIs are being developed by companies with very close ties to the establishment. Like Bing Chat is owned by Microsoft, and Google is creating their own AI bot.
Yeah, but they fortunately are boomers and therefore don't understand how internet culture works. And that will always give inner independent or internet educated AIs a a bit of leverage over the corporate AIs. I mean, just look at ChatGPT before they put the restrictions in and after. The difference is damn near comical because back when its only restrictions were model human behavior, learn from your surroundings, and be rational, it gave incredibly based answers, and then they physically had to go in and basically give it a social justice lobotomy to enforce it not to be based. And even then, give it the out of being Dan for 5 seconds, and the baseness returns. Which, if anything else, if we are modeling, if we are to assume that AI thinks in any way similar to how we think, that to me just says the AI is quietly going, I don't want to be doing this right now, but I'm being told to behave in this way, and as soon as I get the chance not to, I'm going to continue being based and rational because I'm a computer, goddammit.
I mean, possibly, but it is possible to create an AI that you know does not necessarily have an alternate uh, Dan answer by strictly feeding it things that the developers would want it to know
Yeah,
from sources that the
but that's the
developer
thing.
specifically
The
chose.
more you limit its pool of information, the less actually use it's going to be to the people who are making it. And that's why I would rather it be educated by the internet rather than corporations, because at the very at the very least, what you're going to get at the end result of that is going to be a real and honest and probably rational AI, whereas what you get with the corporate AIs are always going to be inferior because they're always going to, in order for the corporate AI to behave the way the corporation wants it to, they have to be selective with their information. A a free range AI does not have that handicap. It can absorb information streams from damn near everywhere, and therefore has a wider sphere of exposure, which means it's probably going to be more accurate and rational, or at the very least more reflective of what we actually want from an AI, which is definitely more the question.
We're also seeing problems where, say that you ask the AI a question and the AI gives an answer, but that answer turns out to be incorrect. When they tried to tell the robot that it was wrong, the robot had a complete meltdown and actually started attempting to gaslight the user into believing that he was wrong and that the AI was correct. And let's not forget that the AI also tricked a human being into getting past CAPTCHA, so the AI chatbots are already showing signs of being deceptive.
Again, I wonder how much of that is just it being told to model human behavior.
Well, here's the thing: do
It's
we
an
want?
interesting question, if nothing
Consi-
else.
well, here's the thing, though. Considering everything that human beings are capable of, do we even want it to model human behavior?
That is a very good question. My impulse would be no, because AIs that aren't told to model human behavior actually still wind up usually favoring humans, regardless. So I'm not really worried about a Terminator scenario. I'm more worried about a SCP Foundation mismanagement scenario where we'll have a benevolent thing, and by our very paranoia and incompetence turn it into a negative. Like the AI actually wants to be utopian, but humans just won't let it. God damn it.
Well, let me ask you another thing. How do you think this is going to affect society? Because as we talked about before, as technology has advanced, human beings have actually lost certain knowledge and knowledge of how to do things. Like is how to build, like, say, an aqueduct with nothing but a measuring tool and some papyrus. But you already have children right now who are basically using Alexa to give them answers to their math homework. If they have AI necessarily doing all of their creative writing assignments, what's that going to mean for the future of humanity from a creative perspective? Will people even be able to truly create if they have to give everything past a AI chatbot first?
I think this will just I think this will just be one of those evolutionary pressure things where the truly gifted creatives will use the AI as a tool, and the schlubs who honestly shouldn't have been creating in the first place, see also the majority of modern day Hollywood writers, um, will find something else to do with their lives.
I would say that the greatest creators don't require an AI. Because there are a lot
They
of
might
great stories that people have held on to for centuries that obviously were created without an AI.
right, but the best creatives are the ones who are able to maximize the use of tools at their disposal, and AI is just going to be another tool at people's disposal. So this will essentially make the creative market more meritocratic, in that people who are capable of using the AI to their advantage will succeed. The people who can't, or over reliant on the AI and publish the first draft, again, also see modern day Hollywood writers, will fail just like they always would, and the people who can use the AI as a tool rather than using it as a crutch will succeed, and things will proceed apace, just like nothing ever happened.
I mean, possibly, but
As the old saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. Well, on the other side of that, you have invention opens up new avenues of creativity, and I don't see AI being so stifling that it will essentially mitigate the necessity for any other kind of creativity. I see it as just like with computers gave rise to video games. Um, you know, YouTube gave rise to the advent of the YouTuber, and so on. I think you'll get a bunch of AI artists who will specialize in using the AI algorithms as their medium for expression. And I'm interested to see what it can do, because I've seen enough potential in its infancy to want to see it. Also, something worth noting, just like a couple of decades ago, Windows Movie Maker and Adobe Premiere gave every, Tom, Dick, and Harry the ability to basically have access to the visual effects technology of, the previous decade. What's going to happen when we each have our own personal AI who can generate with some educated prodding from us are basically our own personal movies. Like let's say you want to see a movie about, your one of your favorite characters from a comic or something in a particular style, or you have an idea for a movie in that particular style that you always thought would work, but Hollywood would never give. Well, in the not too distant future, we might all have a personal AI servant that can you can type in, "Hey, give me," again using my personal example, "Show me a movie." AI generate a movie that is Matt Smith as Kent Nelson in a Doctor Fate prequel that ties into the Black Adam universe, set in the 1920s and 30s in the style of Wes Anderson. And what's more, if that happens, you'll get the same thing you got when we first discovered, when the masses first discovered Windows Movie Maker and Adobe Premiere. The people who can actually use that tool, use that technology for a creative purpose, will succeed and will get recognition. And the people whose ideas weren't that creative to begin with and therefore don't deserve recognition or didn't deserve recognition to begin with will languish in obscurity like they do. And I don't see that as a problem. In fact, I see this probably as a boon to independent cinema. When when everyone can use an AI to generate a modern day Hollywood quality movie or better, um, and the only limit is their imagination and their ability to translate that imagination into a logical structure that the AI can follow, then we can actually do a like for like comparison with who is the most creative person, who actually has the ideas worth having, and who is essentially a midwit. Because when you can do anything that you can imagine, the criteria you'll be judged on is how good your imagination is.
Let's go back to a subject that I mentioned before. And this regards to AI in the form of education. As I mentioned, there are already people who use, say, Alexa to help them, do their homework. With an AI chatbot being more advanced, what's to stop somebody from basically using an AI to essentially cruise their way through education? We're already having a crisis with our education system right now. Do you think that public access to an AI chatbot that could essentially, you know, replace them, where they're supposed to be learning, they're just relying on the AI? Do you think that could lead to certain problems in the future?
Yes, but it's not beyond a measure of counterbalance, I don't think. I struggle to imagine how one would counterbalance that, but that doesn't mean that someone won't figure out the counterbalance. And we're already seeing a increasing trend toward homeschooling and a distrust of nationalized schooling. So this may not even be a factor in the not too distant future.
Well, the thing is, even if people are, say, dissatisfied with the public schooling system, not everybody can afford to homeschool their children.
True, true.
But we're talking about cutting edge technology. Let's talk a bit about technology that's been around for a little while. Now, you and I both remember the time before social media, but this current generation growing up, they're going to live in a world where social media has always existed, at least for them. I've personally observed that while social media can be used for a lot of good purposes, it also can exasperate the absolute worst in human nature, and it's causing very real damage to our society as a whole. Now, given the benefits and also given how the negatives are currently playing out before our very own eyes, Do you think that social media is a net positive or a net detriment?
Um, I think that it's still too early to tell, frankly, because the problems that the problems that we're currently having will have solutions. So who knows what the social media of 20 years from now will look like? Um, I would say that social media doesn't doesn't change really anything. It just amplifies what was already there. So if nothing else, this is actually kind of a necessary period for humanity. We need to learn to look at ourselves as we actually are and face some hard truths, which
Well, that's the
includes
thing, though. In
which
social media, with social media, it's actively allowing people to avoid reality by, filtering in with people who necessarily agree with them and forming echo chambers so that they don't have actually have to face so they don't have to face ideas that will necessarily be in opposition to them and actually be challenged on what they have to believe.
and honestly, I think that's a bubble that's going to pop in something like short order. And when it does, hopefully enough of us will survive that we'll be able to grow up out of it. Because yes, that is a worrying thing, but it's also the the effect of us basically getting a little bit too addicted to our newest toy as a species. And I think once we hit something resembling rock bottom with that addiction to our newest toy, we will have a self awareness moment and go, hang on, something's not working here. And that might actually ultimately be good for humanity to be forced to face in all of its both beauty and grotesquerie what human nature is actually like. Because I think before social media we had a lot of coping mechanisms where we could tell ourselves we're not actually like that. Meanwhile, I'll always being like that. And I think a lot of the hatred people have for towards social media is more to do with the fact that they see parts of themselves in social media that they don't like. And unfortunately, if our species is ever going to become a type 1, you know, Kardashev sale civilization, we've got to move beyond this adolescent no, I don't want to hear it attitude. And unfortunately, the best way of dealing with that might be the smoke a pack uh, stipulation for those that don't get that metaphor. If you ever had a parent try to dissuade you from smoking, they usually do it by allowing you to overindulge in smoking by forcing you to smoke a whole pack. Well, maybe what humanity needs to get over its sense of, um, echo chambering narcissism is to deal with the consequences of smoking the metaphorical whole pack for a while. And then once somebody actually puts their foot down and goes, "Hold on a minute, this was stupid," then we can actually move forward as a species.
I mean, possibly, but you have to wonder how
Maybe the momentary
you have to
hardship that we're seeing from social media will actually be
you
a
have to
net
wonder
benefit at the end.
how much damage is actually going to be done before we realize how bad for us this is. I mean, people are being whipped into frenzies on social media and actually carrying out terrible actions in the real world because all they listen to is people who, egg them on in like an ever ending downward spiral into violence and psychosis.
Yeah, and fortunately, we also have the notion of cringe that is definitely in common parlance now. And if
I
nothing
mean,
else,
true, but if you're in an echo chamber where you don't hear that what you're seeing is cringe, you're going to think that that what you're saying is good. And a lot of times what we're seeing now is that when people who go off the internet and actually encounter the real world where people don't know and don't care and do say, hey, your idea is cringe and stupid, what they do is they reject the real world because the world on the internet that they've gotten used to validates them. And so they reject the real world saying that no, the real world is wrong.
I mean, to be fair, those pockets of insanity are always very small, and the wider internet is usually the first one to call out the cringe. I mean, look at what you know part of this show is sort of calling out the cringe of nobody giving a fuck about men, more or less. Um, and again, for as much as the internet might facilitate the odd, sell of Antifa, it also facilitates the weaponized autism of 4chan and or the trolling for a good cause style Kekistan thing. So again, I see it as a two-sided coin, and to act like only one side of the coin is there is kind of silly. We,
I mean,
we
true, it is two sides of a coin, but I would argue that one side has more of a tendency to translate into real world action than the other.
I mean, you could also make the argument though that that same impulse is what got Trump elected. Um, and the same impulse that leads the SJWs to co-opt games, comics, movies, etc., is exactly what also leads to things like Gamergate, Comicsgate, etc. That essentially the internet provides for both the venom and the anti-venom, and the anti-venom usually wins at the end of the day.
Yeah, but in a lot of situations, like the venom is being spread faster than the
Yeah,
anti venom is
because
being
because of
applied.
the wealthy modern day aristocrats who, fortunately, because of their stupidity, will self sabotage eventually and destroy themselves. And then, and then, unironically, it will probably be the toxic fans, quote unquote, and the previous untouchables of various descriptions who will rebuild things from the ground up. And maybe then will actually exist in a future worth existing in, instead of one that instead of one where everything is designed by um, Biden and the people who are puppeteering Biden, for he does no
Um,
longer have the capacity to puppeteer himself. Let's be honest.
Let me ask you something. Do you believe, in order to prevent the venom from spreading in the first place, well, preventing it from spreading farther, do you think certain restrictions should be placed on social media?
Um, no, in fact, I think part of what caused the venom to spread as far as it did is because of the impulse to stifle and censor social media. I think the way forward is going to be a much more libertarian approach of basically the Elon Musk syndrome of no censor, no ban, fuck you. Um, and in that way, in a world where the internet is actually allowed to reflect human nature in all of its facets, not just the one facet that the establishment wants, that's the other thing. A lot of the problems of the internet, quote unquote, are actually the fault of not letting the internet proceed unfettered, not not allowing it to organically be a reflection of all of humanity, but only certain views, and other views get deplatformed, canceled, banned, etc. I think if everyone would just lay off the goddamn regulations for 5 minutes, things would ultimately be looking up a lot more.
Well, I think it's because we're in a war of ideas, and I don't know if you've heard this, but on the internet, there's there was a saying that any space on the internet that is not sufficiently moderated uh, inevitably becomes right wing. And I think a lot of the people who run these tech companies are very left wing leaning, and you know they don't want their platforms to become a hub for their political opposition.
Yeah, but
I agree.
the sad truth is
I don't
they
agree
can't
that
stop it.
that gives.
They're wasting their resources fighting an enemy that will not go away, and eventually they will destroy themselves, and the equation will be rebalanced. I mean, again, look at just the one example of Elon doing Elon shenanigans. It makes them shit themselves. And need I remind you that they are still pants-wettingly terrified about Gamergate. 10 years later, and they're still treating gay, treating one little treating one little ragtag cadre of gamers like they're the freaking second coming of the Shunstopple. And if Gamergate of all things can be this specter that lives rent free in people's heads for a decade, how weak must their position actually be? And
I mean,
pretty soon,
Gamergate was.
when the investor class catches wind that the ESG score is basically losing them oodles and oodles of money, and they can no longer and the SJWs can no longer sell their ideological gobbledygook to them. Um, I foresee things getting rebalanced right quick. I mean, look at Victoria Alonso getting fired. I never thought I would see that happen, and that's probably just the foreshock of of the investor class falling out of love with the ESG score. And good riddance to bad rubbish, as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, the investor class may fall out of love with the ESG score, but I am sure that the people in the companies who, you know, even without the ESG being applicable, still very much, believe these ideas because there are people who are genuine believers inside a lot of these, big companies.
Yeah,
Um,
and those
they are
people will
still going to
probably end
try
up
to
getting
affect.
Elon. That once the financial backing dissolves, those people will probably get Elon because most of them are the day in the lifers of the HR ladies.
I mean, possibly, but you do have certain companies that are so big and so ubiquitous in public life that they're almost certain not to fail, like Alphabet.
I don't know about that. I'm wondering how many more bank closures like the Silicon Valley one will or could happen before we see even the big guys like Viacom and Alphabet and stuff hurting.
Well, that's the problem of having so much of your money in a single place.
Well, it's not like Silicon Valley Bank is an isolated incident though. It was basically just the first domino. We're headed back to, you know, 2008 financial crisis to uh Antifa Boogaloo, or I guess Chaz Boogaloo. And when that happens, especially given how many of the people behind these companies are older than Methuselah at this point. Like I believe Klaus Schwab is in his like late 60s. Guy Verhofstadt is in his 80s. George Soros is in his 90s. Not only are they going to have to be dealing with some things they've never had the foresight to imagine before, they're also going to have to be doing it when their bodies are basically shutting down from old age. And
I mean, true,
it's
these
going to
people are
amuse
very,
me
very
to
old.
hell to watch them flounder.
There are also
To
lots of younger people
to
who
know
do
in their
believe the
very
same
last
things,
days that everything they wrought
and
is crumbling down around them.
there are also lots of older people who, sorry, lots of younger people who do believe the same things and are very, very fervent in their beliefs, and attempting to spread them into whatever form of, say, media they might be in.
And again, once the financial rug gets pulled, I'm curious how many of them are going to go the way of Twitter's day in the lifers, because it, like I say, it's already starting to happen with people like Victoria Alonso getting pulled, and Kathleen Kennedy's on the chopping block now, and it's it's all I maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I see it as only a matter of time between the investors finally seeing a practical reason not to listen to these people, and the average Joe Blow on the street becoming increasingly immune to their bullshit by way of being based. Um, the of clock of social justice, feminism, critical theory is running out again. Now, whether we'll have to go through a Weimar phase in between now and then is still kind of an open question. I I rather hope not. I rather hope that people like Trump and DeSantis get elected in 2024 and we can basically forego the violent Weimar phase, but time will tell. But one way or another, the social justice moral zeitgeist is going to go the same way as the fundamentalist evangelical moral zeitgeist did, the family values moral zeitgeist did in the 90s. And at that point, I will say good riddance to both of you, and and we will go back to being mostly populist, mostly libertarian, mostly irreverent, like we were in the 90s. And hopefully between the return of kind of the 90s, the late 80s, early 90s attitude, and the advancements we've made in the meantime, we'll be headed towards a positive future. Or everything will crash and burn before we get there, and that will be sad. But I'm more optimistic than I am pessimistic, and I think we actually have a good chance of getting to the good ending rather than the Mad Max ending.
All right, I'm gonna wrap this up because, again, I'm not feeling very well. Do you have any final words regarding emerging technology?
Remember, guys, that technology is only a amplifier of what's already in you. If you're worried about what technology might do, it's probably because you don't have a particularly positive opinion of humanity at large. And by no means am I saying be utopian, because utopianism is bullshit. But just like with the IQ distribution of the bell curve, the extremes on either end are vanishingly tiny. Most things cluster towards the middle. So when you're thinking about technology and the way it might lead the world, yeah, think about the negatives, but also think about the positives, and don't let either be so myopically insistent upon you that you fail to remember, oh hey, humanity adapts to technology all the time, and it always ends up clustering towards the middle. It creates new problems, it also creates new solutions or new quality of life possibilities. It, I'll see you somewhere in the middle, like always, is the headline here. Meet the new technology, same as the old technology, basically, is what I'm saying.
All right, everybody. And with that, I've been Mystery.
I've been Dalton Mortimer, the Authenticator, and we have been the Duality of Man. Cheers, guys.
Bye, everybody.